Hey, this is Paul Comfort. Thanks for being with us today on Transit Unplugged. We're now over 300 episodes in, interviewing some of the world's most interesting people that run public transportation systems around the world and some of the top thought leaders in our public transit industry. And today we're happy to bring to you an interview I did live and in person with Dave Reage. He's the Executive Director of Halifax Transit and the first Vice Chair of the Canadian Urban Transit Association. We visited both of them just recently up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. They're out like in the Atlantic Ocean, even further than the East Coast of the United States is. They're 1 hour ahead of us when you do the time zone thing. But we had a great time. We toured Halifax, Nova Scotia, got to learn a lot about it. We filmed there. Our film crew was there. We did an episode of Transit Unplugged TV. So this podcast is an audio companion piece to that video. When you're done listening, I encourage you to jump right over to YouTube to our channel there, Transit Unplugged TV, and join the hundreds of thousands of people who are now watching our show every month. It's a travel show. We feature the food, the culture, the music, the entertainment there, and then show you how to get around on public transportation. Happy to say that our program recently just won a big award, the Transit Unplugged TV show did, for an episode we filmed in Canada on the Rocky Mountaineer train, and that is the 30th Annual Communicator Awards. We won in our category, travel shows. It is a highly respected honor to get this. It's the best kind of in branded media. So we're excited about that, an award-winning show now. But so jump over there after you hear this podcast, because this podcast is in several pieces. I interviewed it as Dave and I were just riding together, walking together, just picking his brain about their ferry system, what's going on there as they are now moving to an electric ferry system and a brand new electric ferry terminal. We went out and visited the site. Talked to him about his transit system, why he got into transit, why he loves it and stays there. All kinds of just a great, interesting conversation. And Tris Hussey, our editor, was able to put some fun music in between, kind of from the area. The Halifax area is fascinating. I'd never been there before and did not realize what an interesting, fascinating connection it has to the Titanic shipwreck. We filmed a lot of it. We actually went out to the cemetery where there's over 100 bodies buried that were taken up from the ocean after that terrible, dreadful disaster in the early 1900s. It's just an interesting connection because they were the closest big port city to where it happened. And so they're the ones that went out to try to do the rescues and all from that city. So it's a maritime city on the coast. That's why they're one of only 2 cities in Canada that has a ferry system operated by the transit system. The other one is on the other side in Vancouver with my friend Kevin Quinn, who runs that transit system there, TransLink. And so anyway, we dive into all things Halifax and maritime. And I think you'll find this a great, fun, interesting interview with a great guy, Dave Reage, who is going to be the next chair of CUTA after this term. So enjoy the podcast and let us know what you think about it. Give us a rating and review. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can send me a question if you want me to answer any questions you might have about the public transit industry by paul.comfort@transitunplugged.com. Stay connected with us. We love you, our listeners, and we're hoping that this show enlightens you, informs you, and entertains you each week as we bring you another interesting guest. Today, enjoy this episode with Dave Reage. Thanks for being with us, Dave.
My pleasure, Paul.
This already, we're only halfway through the trip, but this has been an amazing trip. Tell us some about your transit system here in the city itself.
Halifax is the capital of the province of Nova Scotia. It's a city of about 500,000 people, the largest city in Atlantic Canada. And, us as a transit system operate about 400 buses, over 1,000 employees, and 5 harbor ferries as part of the way that we service the citizens of Halifax.
And we're on one of your buses now. This one's obviously a diesel because there's a little noise going on. Yeah. Later on, when you have your 2 electric buses going, we could do this very quietly, couldn't we?
Absolutely, it'll be silent.
We were out at your garage yesterday with your head of maintenance, Norman, who showed me the battery electric buses that you've got coming. 2 of them are there. I thought it was pretty cool. You have one of the buses loaded up with sandbags, like 5,000 pounds to, be like it was 36 passengers. Tell us about what you're doing there with alternate fuels and those kind of things. What are you exploring?
Yeah, so right now the first part into it is we're on battery electric buses. So we do have 60 buses coming from our supplier is Nova Bus. So right now with the first 2 we have, we're really doing a lot of testing, a lot of training. Going to a fleet like this is really one of the biggest transitions you could ever make. I've been telling my team to keep in mind, the last time we had a transition this significant, we were actually going from trolley buses to diesel buses. So it's all kind of coming full circle now. And, the testing piece is so crucial because we need to learn everything we can and make sure we know how it's going to work, make sure it's going to work before we ever put it out into public service.
That's smart. Yeah, he told me they were even doing like hill testing see how the brakes hold, those kind of things?
Absolutely, yeah. Although the bus itself is very similar to the untrained eye, so many systems are different, new, modern. So, from safety to reliability, we need to make sure we've tested everything out very thoroughly and we're comfortable with it.
Speaking of hilly, I didn't realize that Halifax was going to have such big hills. We walked up to the Citadel today. I mean, is that the way it is all over the town, and your buses do okay in that?
Yeah, it's a very hilly city. We don't have mountains, but we have lots of small hills, and that's the nature of Halifax. It's something like part of the testing for the e-buses is, what do all these hills do to our range? What kind of kilometers can you get when they're climbing the hills? But then coming down the hills, the regenerative braking will actually help to restore the battery. So that's the kind of profile we need to get, so we fully understand how far we can drive these, different weather conditions, everything like that. We have a nice summer, we have a cold winter. So how does that temperature impact the battery life as well?
And what about other fuels? Are you looking at anything else?
Starting to look into hydrogen now. There's a lot of push for hydrogen here in Nova Scotia. The province is very interested in developing a hydrogen economy, so we're looking to see how can we tap into that. There's a lot of players in Halifax right now starting down that path, so I'm interested in looking to see what is that proper fleet mix. Like, what can we do that's a mixture, some battery electric, some hydrogen, and see where we go from there.
So the system itself, you're part of the city government, right? Tell us how you're structured.
Yeah, so we're a department of the Halifax Regional Municipality. So we report up through the Commissioner of Operations, who's the second in command for the city. So ultimately, we are a department alongside Public Works or any of those other departments.
And does the city have a dedicated funding source for you, or you have to go to the general fund every year? How does that work?
Yeah, so we are funded predominantly through property taxes. It's similar to the rest of the municipality. We do get about 35% cost recovery from the fare box, so that's a pretty average ratio. It's something that our council is happy with being at that rate, I think. So that's the funding mixture.
And tell us about your history a little bit, your background.
Yeah, so I've been with Halifax Transit for 17 years now. I've been the executive director for the past 8 years. Was always, I would kind of joke that I was that kid who liked buses and trains and stuff and never really grew out of it. So,
that's pretty awesome, dude.
Yeah, so, I get to do a job where, having a shelf full of model buses isn't weird.
Yeah, like we all do at home, right? From all these conferences we go to. That's great. And tell me something about your team.
Yeah, so I have an amazing team. It's, I'm the one here talking to you today, Paul, but the reality is, as a leader, I'm only as good as my team, and I'm really lucky to have a fantastic team. So under me, I have a leadership team of five directors, operations, planning, technology, all of the various kind of typical departments for a transit system. But yeah, overall, we lead a large team of people, over 1,000 employees. So it takes a lot of fantastic people doing amazing work to make the transit system function.
Yeah. And how's ridership been?
We're doing well. We exceeded the pre-COVID numbers back in September, so that's great. That's kind of I think a bit of a milestone we can put in the rearview mirror now and really start focusing on growth going forward. We very rapidly went from being under our pre-COVID numbers to now we're actually well over them and seeing like overloads and all the issues that come with the service that got very busy very rapidly. This
city is growing, right? And your system is growing with it?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are the fastest growing city in Canada right now.
Really?
Which is incredible. Halifax traditionally was kind of a slow and steady town. We never really boomed. We never really had any bust. But, since 2020, we have been growing so rapidly. If you've been before, even a few years ago, you might not recognize parts of the city anymore because they're growing so rapidly, and there's lots of cranes in the sky.
So I know that housing has become a big issue up here in Canada, the cost of housing. Matter of fact, CUTA did a study on it this year that I talked to Marco D'Angelo, the executive director, about at the fall conference we did out in Edmonton. Is housing a little cheaper here? Is that why it's growing so much?
Well, housing used to be cheap here, and I would say housing is still cheaper here than the biggest cities, like still cheaper than Vancouver or Toronto, like your big. But the reality is, the wage levels in Nova Scotia aren't as high as in those cities, but our housing prices are also skyrocketing. The rental vacancy rate is effectively zero. So that's why you're seeing, I think, a lot of catch up to bring housing back in. And housing affordability is a real issue. And I think it's a good thing for transit in a way because we can really help solve that issue. More dense housing built around good, solid transit could really help fix that problem.
And last question for this segment would be, tell us where we're headed to and what's going to happen there.
Yeah, so we're headed out to a community called Bedford, and particularly the Mill Cove area. So this year we received funding from the federal, provincial, and municipal governments for $260 million to build the Mill Cove Ferry service. So this is the first new ferry service we've built since 1986. So really excited to be adding a new route to the ferry family. So it'll be high-speed electric ferries. Commuting time expected to be about 18 minutes into downtown. Comparatively, driving at rush hour, you could be up to 40, 50 minutes, even an hour, depending on traffic. So really excited for this mode to come into play, really be a time-competitive transit option.
How do you price ferries? I mean, and it's not cars, right? It's just people?
Yeah, just people on the ferry. You know, we have basically some ferry experts on contract, some naval architects who can kind of look at it and do a high-level design of what we're going to need based on the speeds and harbor conditions and things like that. And then ultimately they can work up a price estimate for us.
Gotcha. And the passenger fare, is it a lot higher than riding a bus, or tell us how that works?
No, so the fares for the new route, we haven't determined that yet. Okay. But yeah, for the existing ferry routes, they're all the same price, all the same fares as the bus system.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. And can you transfer from one to the other? How does that work?
Yep, it's a free transfer between the two of them. It is one united system.
All right, Dave, now we're out. Tell us where we're at now. We're off the bus. It's a little quieter.
That's right, Paul. We're in Mill Cove, in the community of Bedford, and right beside the pile of rocks that will one day be the Mill Cove Ferry Terminal. So this is where our 5 electric ferries are going to come. And it's, the location here, part of why it was chosen, it's very sheltered water, so much more safe and safe for docking and service reliability.
So, like, where will the ferries go? They come here. I mean, what's here where we're at, by the way? It's just like it looks residential.
Yeah, so this is a suburban community, one of the fastest growing communities in the Halifax area, actually. So that's part of the push for this service. Fast growing community without a lot of, good road connections and things like that, and fairly far from downtown. So this ferry will go from here right to the downtown terminal. About an 18-minute ride. Again, your drive could be 40, 50 minutes, so a much quicker ride. And I mean, riding the ferry is amazing, so who wouldn't want to be on the boat?
I got to meet your captain that's the head of your ferry boat operation here. Tell us about, public transit folks, there's not many of them that run ferries. Tell us about what that's like as part of a transit agency and having the right people in charge and all that.
Absolutely. It's unique, I guess is the best way to put it. It's, the most highly regulated thing we do. It is federally regulated here in Nova Scotia by Transport Canada, or in Canada by Transport Canada. At the end of the day, I mean, everything in transit is about safety. With ferries, it's a whole different level because, you are literally on a ship away from shore. So, things that could be a little bit bad on shore are really bad when you're offshore. So it's unique, that's for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was great that you got a guy that actually has captained ships out at sea to be your head of ferry operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Mervin's amazing. He has such extensive experience, large ocean-going vessels. So his mariner experience is so invaluable at keeping our system running efficiently and safely.
And how many people does it take on a ferry system to run it, a boat, and then are they all your employees?
Yeah, so they're all of them are our employees. So typically we run a crew of 4, and that will allow us to carry a capacity of about 250 people. We can add a 5th crew member to that, and that goes up to our maximum capacity of 390. So it's kind of like an airplane, and on an airplane, the more flight attendants you have, they kind of go in line with the number of passengers for evacuation purposes. It's very similar on a ferry. We need to make sure that in the unlikely event of an emergency, we have enough people to get everybody off safely.
You sounded just like a flight attendant. In the unlikely event of an emergency, things will happen. And so very fun kind of thing. And you mentioned earlier that you ride the ferry back and forth. And I think Mervin told me yesterday you have 1 million people a year ride your system, something like that on the ferries?
Yeah, it's about that. It's interesting because it's a very seasonal ridership and kind of in the opposite way that most transit systems are. Usually on a bus system, your ridership drops in the summer. People are on vacation and that. But the ferry system actually goes way up in the summer because...
Sure, it makes sense. Yeah.
And our existing ferries have an open top deck, so people love to sit up there on a sunny day like we have today. We have tourists in town. So, in the summer, we'll see about about 5,000 or so people per day, and then it goes down to about 3,000 or so in the winter.
That's wild. Yeah, I mean, that's something your boats have. My good buddy Kevin Quinn out there, he's got ferries too, but I don't remember being able to get up on the deck there, but you can on yours, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's one of the distinctive features. And actually, I remember when we were looking to build our current fleet of ferries, there was an idea from one of the designers that we didn't need that deck, and I said, no, that's a Halifax thing. That's a Dartmouth thing. We absolutely need to be able to, even if we can only sit up there like 3 and 4 months of the year, people want to be up there.
That's awesome. Where are we at now, Dave?
We are at the Halifax Ferry Terminal in downtown Halifax.
Okay. And what are we about to do?
We're about to hop on the ferry. We're going to Dartmouth. We're going to supper at the canteen.
That's great. Tell me some about your ferry system, some of the stuff we were just talking about.
Yeah, so we have 5 ferries. They're diesel-powered ferries, and we use 4 in service in any given day. And the vessels now range in, from 6 to 10 years old. They were replacements for the originals, which were, 2 were built in the 70s, 1 built in the early 80s. So, about a 40-year lifespan for a ferry, and expect to get about 40 years out of these. I'll be long retired, and they'll still be out there sailing the harbor.
Now, we were mentioning that a lot of the maintenance is done in harbor, but you're building a new facility that we just talked about.
Yeah, that's right. So, when we had 3 ferries, we could kind of get away with not having a dedicated ferry maintenance facility. But with 5 ferries now, it's really quite challenging. And with the Mill Cove Ferry project coming online, we'll have 5 more ferries. So part of that project does include building us a proper on-harbor maintenance facility.
Dave, we made it over here to Dartmouth. You live over this area, right?
I do, just outside of Dartmouth, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Great restaurant here, the canteen. But you've been in this system for quite a while. How long have you been the executive director?
8 years as executive director. I've worked here most of my career, actually, 17 years in total.
What is it about this job and this city that keeps you here?
It's, Halifax is beautiful. I think as we've seen, it's, I have a lot of family connections here, but, Halifax is just a wonderful, beautiful place to live. The people are friendly. The food is great. It's hard to imagine living anywhere else, honestly.
And what else do you have going? You've got the big ferry system coming, the expansion. Do you have anything else new happening?
Yeah, the next thing that we're really trying to work on getting funded is actually a bus rapid transit network for Halifax. We do have a rapid transit strategy that's been approved by our council. Now it's about trying to find the funding to build out the 4 bus rapid transit lines that will complement the ferry system quite nicely and really allow the city to grow around transit in a smart way.
And I noticed when we were down at the ferry terminal, you've got good connections with your buses too, right? So people come in by ferry. It's kind of a link between your bus service, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The ferry really is, it is that cross connection in the middle of the city. Having a harbor right in the middle of the city can be a transportation challenge, or it can really be an asset depending on how you use it. So we do tightly connect the buses and the ferries so that you can take the ferry and then continue on your way.
So what's your level of involvement with CUTA?
So CUTA's played a huge role in my career, and actually way back to, I was a delegate at one of the first youth summits back in 2004.
Oh, yeah.
So
I spoke at one in Edmonton this last year.
Right, yeah. So actually the second CUTA Youth Summit, I was a delegate, and that really kind of solidified my interest in the transit industry.
Really? How old were you?
I was 24.
Okay.
I was 24. I just snuck in under the category of youth. But, so it's played such a big role in my career that once I advanced further in my career, I wanted to give back. So I've been a member of the board now for about six or 7 years, and on the executive. Currently, I'm their first vice chair.
Oh, great.
CUTA.
So does that mean next year you're chair?
That's the kind of line of assumption.
Oh, that's exciting,
that's
man.
Right. Yeah.
Who are you going to bump off?
Get Kelly Palenci.
Okay.
We'll be happy to hand the reins over. I think it's generally a 2-year term, and it's a great opportunity, but quite a bit of work actually. So Kelly's an amazing chair, but I imagine she'll be ready to kind of hand it over to me once we get there.
It's a lot of work.
It is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
with no compensation, right?
Yeah. It's a lot.
So Mike Bismeyer, he's vice chair of the business members, right?
Yes, that's right.
So you both are going to elevate at the same time?
Yeah.
That'll be great. He's a good pal.
Mike's a great guy.
Yeah, that's great. So an association played a big part in your career.
It really did. Yeah, it really did. I mean, in terms of like getting to know people, and I mean, like the conferences, like the one we've just hosted in Halifax, such a great opportunity to get together and share information. Because like one of the things that's great about this industry is that like none of us are competing, and we've all got similar challenges. So it's just so good to get together twice a year, talk about what's going on, and figure out how to learn from each other and how to fix the common challenges.
Yeah. That's great. I like it. I don't know how to say this, but it's like America has the big association too, American Public Transit Association. When they get together, it might be 5 or 10,000 people. It's big. It feels like a family here in Canada between all of you. Am I feeling it right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Because CUTA is small, and I've been to a few APTA conferences, and they're overwhelming compared to what I'm used to here. But because CUTA is, the Canadian transit industry is smaller, less popular this country, so you really are seeing a lot of the same people every 6 months or every year.
You see Wade today, right? I haven't seen him for a while. I love that guy.
Yeah, you can realistically get around and see everybody over the course of a 4 or 5 day conference. So it really is, we had like 250 people here in Halifax. The fall one's a bit bigger. It'll be 400, maybe 500 people, but all still very, very small and manageable.
And you all seem to be very supportive of each other.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to know what it's like to work in the transit industry and the challenges that come with that unless you do it. So when you're at a conference like this, it's such a good opportunity to talk to people that know what you're dealing with and you may have a good solution for it, or maybe just vent together over a beer, It's a good time.
So prior to this, before you were executive director, it was Eddie Robar, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, Eddie's a good pal of mine and of the show. And so now he's gone to Edmonton.
Exactly.
And now he's the acting city manager, whatever.
Yeah.
Kevin Quinn, who used to work with me at MT Baltimore, is now the head of Vancouver Transit. Aaron Pinkerton's a good friend of mine at BC Transit. And like I said, Strathcona and now Kerry. I mean, you've got some great people up here.
Absolutely. The transit industry has got a lot of great people in it, and that's what makes these conferences special, and why you see people that's why I want to get back to the association.
That's great. I guess last question would be about technology. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about where you're at in your technology future, what's happening for you.
Yeah. So the newest thing is our fare app, FX Go. So that's active now. So you can buy a transit fare on the app. No more fumbling for change and trying to remember to go buy a monthly pass at the drugstore every month. So that's kind of the early stages. The next thing we're working towards very rapidly is actually open payment. So we'll have validators on all of our transit vehicles and at the ferry terminals, and you can just tap a credit card, tap a debit card. So you don't have to even download the app if you don't want to at that point. And my philosophy around fare management has always been that as long as you want to pay me, I don't really care how you want to pay me. I will take your money. So just making it as easy and barrier-free as possible.
That's good. You've got a 35% fare box recovery ratio. You told me. That's great.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's about average in Canada, but I understand that's probably pretty high compared to some of the U.S. systems.
Yeah. When I was in Baltimore, man, when I first got there was a law in place where we had to have a 50% fare box recovery ratio. Wow. We weren't even close to it. We were under 25. So the legislature changed the law. But a lot of cities now are hovering around 14, 15% fare box recovery. So, this fiscal cliff that's coming there is interesting. I guess, I do have one more question for you for the podcast here, and that is bus availability. Mm-hmm. So at the big reception the other night, I was mingling with everybody, talking to everybody, and it seems like you guys are having a very similar issue in Canada. You're down to 2 manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
Nova, New Flyer.
That's right.
And everyone was telling me they're having the same issues we're having in America, where it's hard to get buses.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I don't know that anyone has the answer yet. The good thing is, there's been lots of conversations, really healthy, open conversations between the bus manufacturers and the transit systems being facilitated by CUTA, because it's an issue for all of us. The bus availability is not good for the manufacturer. It's an issue for us. So I'm confident we'll find a solution, because the industry, we have to find a solution. Yeah. There's no other way around it. Without buses, what are we all doing here?
Right. Yeah, that's something. Well, good luck to you. And dude, you've got an amazing transit system. I just love your ferry system. You have something fun and unique. And super excited about your electric ferries that are coming. Yeah. And is that the first for Canada?
Yes. Yeah, the first in transit use for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And a brand new terminal, new services, growing. You've got a great city here. It seems like it's very well rooted in its history, but growing for the future.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we're proud of our history here, but we're also not a museum. We're a modern city, and we're growing up.
Well, best of luck to you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much. My pleasure, Paul.
Hi, this is Tris Hussey, editor of the Transit Unplugged podcast. Thanks for listening to this week's episode with our special guest, Dave Reage, head of Halifax Transit. Coming up next week, we have Eric Van Wagenen, CEO of We Drive You, formerly known as National Express. Eric and Paul talk about contracting in the U.S. and how it's helping transit move forward beyond the pandemic. Hey, if you like Transit Unplugged, take a second and share it with someone else. Even if you just share the link from your favorite podcast app, that can get someone into the show and part of our Transit Enthusiast Network. Transit Unplugged is brought to you by Modaxo. At Modaxo, we're passionate about moving the world's people. And at Transit Unplugged, we're passionate about telling those stories. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.